Thanks for coming to the University of Oregon Women's Center Out Loud performance event. This is Out Loud, again, a queer and trans performer showcase. And today we are featuring Guayaba from Tacoma, and I will let Guayaba take the mic.
Hi. So first I would like to do a land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and we honor with gratitude the land itself of the Duwamish tribe. I don't personally live in Seattle, but I live in Tacoma, Washington, and the Duwamish, they reach down to Olympia and beyond, and we are currently occupying their land. I apologize also, I have an 18-year-old cat here in the background, so that may be an interruption at some point, but yeah, I am Guayaba, and I am an artist that resides in Tacoma, Washington, and yeah, just being an artist in the time of COVID is really been interesting. I am mostly a singer and a rapper, but I consider myself a multidisciplinary artist. I've been getting into a lot of graphic design work. I've made like the covers for my past albums, and I sing a lot about my heritage. I sing a lot about magic and specifically like Santeria, and I like to incorporate that within my music. I like to incorporate I sing about my fatness, my queerness, just my otherness, being a person of color in the Northwest, as well as like having a lot of these intersections is it can be very difficult. And now being in this time where we're so disconnected with each other is very hard. So many of us relied on community, and like being in a physical space with each other, that we are now having to adapt to that. So I feel like my performances, that was a huge way for me to connect with people. So now I'm in this space where I'm trying to traverse that as well.
Awesome. So you actually talked about Santeria a little before, and I kind of had a question about like, how do you see kind of the use of Santeria in kind of reclaiming your own identities? Like you talk a lot about otherness, and so I think like with having other identities, you aren't allowed to really like claim them as is and claim them as like a non-negative term. And so I'm wondering if Santeria kind of has a similar sentiment of it kind of being a previously colonized, like the use of it has been discouraged because of colonization. So I wonder if you can speak further to that and kind of how you use that. Yeah.
Absolutely. The climate has changed so much since when I first began. When I put out Black Trash White House, I feel like it wasn't talked about as much, but it's become so open. I feel like, non-Westernized versions of witchcraft. I think that Santeria, Vodun, just like Yoruban god worship has become such, I wouldn't say a common practice, but within the circle that I travel in, it's become like so much more than what it was, which is like, it's amazing to have that opportunity to speak with so many people about something that's not been bastardized by the West. It's like, we always make fun of like white people for having that, like, we are the witches that you couldn't burn. And then it's just like, yeah, because you're the ones who like colonized us. And like, it's great to be able to get back to these practices, and to like, it's hard because Santeria is something that was practiced because of colonization, you know, like we had to have certain names for these gods um, because we had to like kind of cover up what we were practicing. But at its core, you know, it all comes from the stem of Yoruban religion. So at its core, a lot of what we're practicing comes from the same root. So I think that's why a lot of us are able to connect with each other. But I feel like I know so many brujas at this point, you know, and it feels like there's so much of a network of us now. You know, it's so different than it was a few years ago. I feel like so many people are more comfortable being open with their practices.
Thank you so much. So you talk about also connection, right? So kind of moving on, connection with folks and especially growing communities. And so like how is like a really, or what was the main way that you kind of met a lot of like practitioners of Santeria and like Brujas?
I think that's a way that COVID hasn't really affected that in this way, because I feel like a lot of them that I've met have been through the internet, which has been great. There's been like a big community of brujas, like via, you know, there's like a lot of a lot of Facebook groups. I've noticed like Facebook isn't really the place to be at this point, but a lot of private Facebook groups are really great places to be. You know, ones that are really well curated or like well moderated. You know, can be really great places for just like very niche groups or like groups of QTPOC, and like I like that there are places where we can have resources for each other, as well as just like places where we can connect and feel safer. So I think a lot of those groups have helped me a lot, and just like I don't know, there are places in Seattle as well where we have like brunches where like people who practice like all sorts of magic meet. Like it's, you know, like it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, like white allies or like white partners, it's like you can contribute, you know, via like bring us like champagne or like food, but it's just like, no, this is not a space for you, you know. So that's been really cool.
Mm-hmm. And I'm like, sorry if my transitions are not that great, but kind of
No, I'm
talking
sorry.
about, yeah, like talking about kind of COVID and just like having your communities, right? Like, I kind of want to kind of start asking about your music practice too. Kind of when you are making art, I think about your very specific identities. How do you balance kind of sharing your work and kind of like not like I don't exactly really know how to phrase this question, but like how do you balance the kind of promotion to different groups, like specifically to people who belong to your like communities and like people who don't, and like how do you see that interaction going, I guess?
Yeah, it's hard because in the beginning I did feel like I kind of had to promote myself to particular identities, or like you feel like you're pulled in a lot of different directions because people, especially people who only like who don't have that many intersections, um you know, sometimes they don't understand like that you like the multitudes um that you have to consider, you know. And you can get pulled into a lot of different directions. So really the only thing that you can do is just like be yourself. Like that's really just what it boils down to. And it's like there's you can spread yourself really thin if you are trying to cater to the specific needs of others in the way of like, you know, like I'm not just gonna focus on my fatness, or you know, like I'm not just going to focus on my queerness or anything. Like I'm all of these things, you know, like that's like the point of intersectionality in that way. And like there are going to be it really just is from moment to moment, you know. It's like, but it's like the one thing that is going to inform my life the most is like, you know, it's like just like who I am. It's just like I grew up as like this fat black kid in Bremerton, you know, and that really informs my experience more than anything.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah, so also, I also want to give out to the audience here that feel free to ask questions in the chat and we'll just bring them up as they come up. But kind of also another question that I had is that just as you like talk about being like a more indie performer who has more control of kind of the way you present yourself and the way you present and the way you create, a lot of your like, how do you like do so? How do you absorb your identities in a way that doesn't feel like really boiled down? Like it doesn't feel like you're just boiling it down for presentation. And how do you protect? I feel like things that you're really being intimate about with your music to the public. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
It's hard because I also am somebody who like I overshare so much on the internet, you know, it's like I really do. And I think that part of that is just like from my depression and feeling so trapped in not being able to like talk about how I feel, you know, and it's like a lot of it had to do with like not being medicated or not being in therapy, so I would just like overshare so much, you know. So for a while it felt like so little of my life was private, but even with that I would have a lot of people reach out to me and be like, hey, like thank you for being honest, like I feel this way too. And that was another way to be able to connect with people via the internet, or you know, people would sometimes come up to me IRL and talk about it. um, but it's very hard sometimes, even if you're a musician who like is not in the public eye in that way, you know, even if like if a lot of your existence is online, I feel like it can be hard to keep a lot of yourself private. Even if you are kind of a private person, you know, you kind of have to put a level of yourself out there. Like, I don't know, there are a lot of musicians that I feel like musicians, even when they're anonymous, like I feel like a lot of anonymous musicians are granted that privilege. Like the ones that I've noticed, like a lot of them are still white, you know, which is weird. I'm like, oh, you're supposed to be anonymous, like, but somehow they're still granted that. Um, but that anonymity is something that I tried to do in the beginning, but a lot of my friends were just like, no, like it's not something that you can do. You won't get onto the same level that you want to be if you don't just like be who you are.
Yeah, damn, vulnerability is important. Yeah,
It
I'm like,
is.
yeah, I'm like, that's one of the biggest things that really drew me to you, and to your art. And I think like one of the bigger questions I have too about kind of the way you share yourself is, right, in the situation of COVID, um, is like, has that really changed your, like, the way you've really interacted? I feel like a lot of your presence has really been mostly online. And so I like wonder, like, um, how kind of more usage on the internet has either um, hindered your ability to promote yourself or like allowed you a better chance, and like if there are any kind of barriers currently that don't allow you to promote as well, kind of. And I know you wanted to talk about this too, kind of about the limitations of SESTA and FOSTA, and content creation in general beyond music making.
hmm I've noticed that there is a huge divide right now, and I think that a lot of it is it's so mixed up right now. It has so much to do with accessibility and mental health and wealth and class right now, and it's just a huge shit show. Personally, it's like one of those things where I thought that I would, in the beginning, I wasn't sure how I would do. You know, I thought that I could maybe thrive, but we're in an age right now where so much of what you need is based around, um, you know, it's like you don't necessarily need it to make it worth work, but it definitely helps to have some form of wealth to invest in like nice webcams and tripods and whatnot, that kind of thing, especially as a sex worker. If you're on some sort of webcam and you have an OnlyFans or anything like that, it really helps. Like it completely can change the climate of your work and how much money you're making. I haven't used OnlyFans, but I used to use Chatterbait, and I was a cam girl there. And I just have a built-in webcam, and that completely changes just like how well you do there. So I have a lot of friends who have been trying to stream like DJ sets and just do things via Twitch, and so much of it is reliant on the kind of hardware and software that you have, and a lot of people just don't have that. So it's hard for them to be able to watch a lot of these virtual sets. It's hard for them to be able to keep up with just a lot of what's been going on. I, for one, just my depression has kept me from attending so many of these things, and I'm truly feeling that it's like COVID FOMO is so specific to itself. It's like, I feel like if at some point we're able to have small gatherings, so many people are going to talk about the things that they were able to do, and I'll just be like, well, I didn't, because I'm, even on the age of the internet, I'm still late all the time, and I forget about these things. So the way that it's affected sex workers is absolutely wild. I actually think that sex work is one of the things that's been most affected, because I think that people who would never have considered sex work at this point are now feeling really casual about it. I think that because of it, OnlyFans has become put into the public eye, as well as this new demon time thing on Instagram. And like, I personally, I think it's great. I think that that's an amazing way for sex workers to make money outside of what they would. I mean, it's a way that a lot of strippers are making money. It's like they just like go on live, and a lot of them remain anonymous. They'll wear ski masks or something, and then they're paid via Cash App, and that's great. But it's a lot of it is not like full service sex work. I wonder how a lot of people who are reliant on like Backpage, or women who don't have access to the internet at all, are doing during this time. It's just like, it's weird that a lot of the sex work that is like legal is making people like a lot of money, or helping them stay afloat, while there are people who again, who are not receiving any sort of self-employment benefits or anything, who are just not able to sustain themselves in any way whatsoever.
Right, and because they don't even have those employment papers, they're not eligible for a lot of the like stimulus and the like COVID care stuff too. And yeah, there's a lot of talk about kind of safety practices with a lot of full service sex workers. And they're really on like the foreline of like public safety in a lot of ways, because they've always been the first people to have contact with many people, and so like, or have really intimate contact. So kind of talking about that, and like OnlyFans, and how a lot of people are kind of taking it up. I wonder, if there still is like a stigma, right? There is always going to be a stigma attached to people who are full service sex workers. And I wonder if like OnlyFans is, although it like more people have access to it, if it'll like actually change the way people perceive sex work, or if OnlyFans really just perceive the way that like content creation is being made, other than service making. I don't know if that again makes sense, but I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, if I'm not putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I think that it has absolutely changed the face of content creation, because I think that some people are using OnlyFans as a way to have people pay for content that isn't sexual content at all, which, you know, I don't really know how successful they are doing that. I do know that, I don't know, it's more popular now in culture. I know that Beyonce has sung about it at this point, and sung about Demon Time. So a lot of people are like deeming it socially acceptable now because they see Beyonce as being really respectable, and it's like, oh well, if Beyonce says it, then it's fine, you know. So it's very weird to see how reflected that is in popular culture. You know, a lot of these people who were really denouncing it before all of this are some of the same people who are doing it now, and especially because popular culture says that it's okay. Um, you know, it's interesting. I don't really know a lot of the statistics as far as like how much people are charging or like what kind of content they have necessarily. So I don't really know the difference. You know, it's like I know that a lot of people were ahead of the curve as far as people who already had OnlyFans and whatnot, but it's kind of reminds me of the vein of, you know, the posts of people who are like, oh, I want a sugar daddy, but I don't want to have to like touch him or like look at him, or I just want him to send me money and not have to do anything. And it's like, okay.
It kind of hits further into like sex work is still work. Like you don't just get a free pass for like looking well, like it's further beyond just like a visual thing.
Right.
Yeah, kind of also talking about content creation, you kind of moving into a different lane. You a little talked earlier about kind of how depression gets in the way of like making content. I think a lot of people can relate in general of just like being up and about when you're depressed. And so like when you do have those moments, like one, I guess a question that I have is kind of like, what are ways that you kind of allow that to happen? And then what are ways that you're kind of like, okay, that's enough of like me not doing anything, or like being depressed. Would you mind kind of talking about that?
Yeah. Um, if I'm honest, I've had to allow myself a lot of space because I've never, I mean, this is kind of a collective trauma that we're experiencing. We've never experienced anything like this before. And in the beginning, I really just, like, I can't really even describe the emotion that I felt. I definitely had a few of those moments where like I was like crying and then it turned into like maniacal laughter. Like I was like scaring myself out of from the way I was feeling. And I realized that I just had to allow myself to like, I was calling it like my quarantine sensory deprivation tank. Like I would just kind of like lay there, you know, and I would just have to really think about, you know, this I was just being able to be so reflective on the past few years of like what I've been doing and like the way that it matters to me and who I've been performing for and why. Um and I don't know, like it's given me way more of a different perspective about like what I expect out of other people and myself when I perform. You know, kind of the emotions that I feel, because I had gotten to a point where I was like, oh, do I even like performing? Like, why do I do this? And um, I think that I had gotten to a point where I was like in a depression, thinking about why I was depressed. Um, and I definitely had to just allow myself space to kind of work through that, because I was still like, I was having phone appointments with my therapist. And I kind of realized how little it was helping. I think that this gave me the push to realize that I was in talk therapy, and I was like, oh, I think I actually need DBT therapy. I think that that's going to be helpful. So that kind of gave me the push to do that. Um, it's very hard to be proactive during this time, as far as like pushing yourself to get the help that you need, or pushing yourself um, to just do anything really. Like I'm surprised that people have been able to, um, you know, just get out of bed in the morning sometimes. But it's like there's so much that we have to do to keep going. You know, so many people have had to like start new endeavors or keep going to work, and And then it's like some other people are like, yeah, like I'm making more money than I was like when I was working full time, and like that's so frustrating to hear, you know. And it's like, well, I'm still waiting on that stimulus check, so it's hard. But it's also like you can't just lie in it for the longest time. I don't want to come out of this and think that I've done nothing, you know. Like one of the biggest reasons that I was so depressed was that I felt like such a failure, or like I wasn't contributing to anything. And then I had to examine that as well, because I was like, well, why? You know, like, do I feel like a failure because I'm not contributing to capitalism? Do I feel like a failure because I'm not buying anything? Do I feel like a failure because I'm not contributing to the household as much as I would like to? Or, you know, and I, you know, I kind of started this, you know, once I started like selling rings, I started feeling less of a failure, I guess, but it also didn't solve everything. So I realized that what the problem was definitely me just internally feeling this way, realizing that I felt this way before all of this started, and just realizing that it is just part of being mentally ill, and having to find coping mechanisms for that outside of COVID as well. So I think that a good way to do that is just to, um, you know, it's so silly, but really you just like do those kind of breathing exercises. Anytime I feel myself starting to get worked up, I just have to like stop and just do something else. You know, like if I'm working on music and I'm like, well, I'm really frustrated, I'm like, well, then stop, you know, go like watch a YouTube video about cats, or, you know, listen to some music, watch a movie or something. Sometimes I just have to like lay on the ground and not think about anything, and that helps.
All right, yeah. Thank you. I think a lot about kind of how depression also makes you feel very isolated, and kind of like you get stuck in your own thoughts. And so and I think also like kind of in the context of being in a capitalist society, like we're kind of like really shoveled and funneled into like really thinking individualistically. And so like with having these many identities, and I think like practicing really radical like left politics, how do you kind of see community kind of lifting you out of these situations? Or what our community, at least for you, like what have been community actions that you've been receptive to, or that has helped you like heal throughout your process of creation, or just kind of like continuing on in daily life?
Oh, honestly, there's so much that has been helpful in the community, as far as not just people in my community being supportive, but also like artist relief funds that have happened, have been super helpful. I have a lot of friends who, not just friends, but even acquaintances who, like, as soon as something goes up, like they'll send it to me, which is like amazing. So I have been able to get a few just like relief fund things or grants, because they've been sent to me like as soon as they're posted. And that's been like, it makes me feel like I'm being looked out for, and that has really made me feel some type of way. It's like I never feel like people are really like, that I'm not in the forefront of anyone's mind in that way. And again, I think that just comes from depression, and it kind of just reminded me that people are thinking about me in that way. I think that it's amazing that there are artist relief funds that are being set up. It sucks that we're not being taken care of by anyone else but ourselves, but um, you know, it's great that there's at least something. It's great that there are relief funds that are being set up for you know, for other people outside of the arts. It's just like it's important to be looking out for each other at this point. I It's gotten to the point where it's less than, I've noticed the progression of it, how many degrees of separation it's gone from, and really it was like very quickly did it go from a few to one, you know, as far as who has been affected by it. I have like at this point friends and family members who have people who have been severely affected or who have died from it. And you know, I'm glad that we have community who are looking out for each other, but it's at a point where it's very, I mean, it's been at a point where it's like extremely dire, and it's hard to have to, you know, to be community oriented and to want to be with each other physically, but to not be able to, you know, it's so like it's difficult. I think that it's one of those things where we're really having to do so much work as far as organizing virtually, you know, because it's hard. It's really hard. It's hard to not be able to organize in person, but it's also just like necessary. I feel like sometimes organizing on the internet is kind of invalidated, but I think that it's something that's extremely important, and I think that it's something that's extremely possible.
Yeah, and I think a lot too about like, at least with me personally and the way that I deal with depression, I feel like the internet's really a great way for me to engage when I don't have enough energy to really get out of bed. And like, I think it is actually a tangible way of actually engaging, because you have not only access to like your wallet via like Venmo, but you also have access to sharing information to other people who might not know about more dire situations. Um, and you, like there's kind of that process involves like bringing a lot of people in and kind of spreading that out. And like, yeah, transitions are not my best things, but but kind
Okay.
of moving on into that, just like when you're kind of working in a group, sorry, that's what I was trying to ask, my train of thought. But kind of with COVID, we're talking about reopening a lot, right? And so like I think as a creator, or like for me as an organizer, I have a lot of questions for creators or performers kind of about what they're willing to adapt with, kind of moving on with the reopening stages, or kind of what the next couple of months would look like in terms of like you said, collaboration efforts have like been made different because of COVID, but also like performance platforms. Um, I don't, I'm like, what is the exact question I'm trying to ask? Other than like, kind of in the next stages, where do you see kind of how you will go about doing content, I guess?
Yeah, it's going to be very different because I don't really know if, when, or how shows are going to happen at all, and because I don't think that they should personally. And I know that King County just issued a mask order, so you aren't going to be allowed to be outside without them, like unless you, you know, unless necessary. And um, it's I don't know. I think that's important because I think that we are opening things way too soon. You know, there are so many people I know that are still really who are still being affected. So many people that are still immunocompromised, um, and it's wild to think about everything reopening very soon. You know, when we're still in the midst of all of this and nothing is improving. Um, I know that there have been a few venues who are doing some really innovative things. The Nectar Lounge and High Dive in Seattle are doing like a virtual series in which they're having musicians come in, and it's like, you know, there's no audience and there's you know, everyone keeps their distance, and um, it's great. Like I think it's going to be a really cool opportunity where they just like they live stream everything, and they split the pay between like everyone there. Like the artists get paid, and the videographers get paid, and everyone gets paid. Like I think it's a really important thing. You know, everyone right now in the industry is out of work, and I think it's a great way for us to stay connected and to kind of like to remind ourselves that this is a thing that we do. Um, you know, but I also think that like a lot of my friends, especially a lot of my DJ friends, have been putting on really cool like live sets, and they've been doing so in such cool ways. I have friends that have been doing DJ sets in IMVU, So that's been really cool. I had to like make a character and like um and it's really cute, but like we're at this point, like it's very cyberpunk. I've one of my friends, like 3 of their raves have gotten busted. So I'm like, what do you mean, like your raves have gotten busted by the cyber police? Like, you know, that's as cyberpunk as it gets.
Yeah, kind of talking about like also production too. Like I know does it how does like production look like kind of in the time of now when you can't have as much in-person interaction? Like has much of that changed, or does it still feel like very like okay, I mean we're just sending a file online anyways?
Hmm. Production has been, you know, there isn't that much of a difference, though. Last year I was working a lot in person with an engineer, so that was that aspect has changed a little bit. But as far as production, for sure, I think it's more like us sending beats back and forth and kind of just talking via messenger. So that is kind of the same, and I'm pretty glad for that. It's like there are a lot of things that I was kind of predispositioned to, or I can adapt to a lot better via the internet, but then there of course are a few things where it's just like, oh shit.
Um yeah, dang. So I also think about like when you're how I guess like how do you pick your people to collaborate with, and like how do you do so in a way that is like uplifting the most voices, or is it like competitive to an aspect where it is kind of like pick the best people you can? How do you
Oh,
balance that? Yeah.
yeah, I definitely just anybody whose sound I really like, you know, because I gotta say I'm extremely picky when it comes to that kind of thing, and I don't know how much I like admitting that, but actually no, I do, because it really just you know, I want things to sound like I want them to sound, and I usually find people via just like who I play shows with, you know, and if I hear a band that I love, then I fan out really, and I'm just like, yo, like I would love to collaborate, you know, and um, a lot of times they're down, and or you know, if it's somebody online that I think is very cool, I don't know, a lot of times I'm way too shy to ask. And sometimes I'll get lucky, like there have been musicians that I have acquaintances with and we meet and it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like now I have this in, or like now we're gonna work together, and um I don't know, it feels a lot less weird, like if there's kind of a bridge there. Or sometimes people will approach me and, you know, it's just like their work is very cool and I'm like, yeah, okay, let's do it. You know, I definitely am very open to people sending me beats, and if I like the beat, I'm definitely always open to doing something with it.
Um Yeah, I'm gonna start taking questions from other people. And so far we have one, and it asks, who are some of your biggest artistic inspirations?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, Celia Cruz is a really big one. Um, she's awesome. She is this amazing artist, and she's Cubana, and she is just like this salsa legend, and she is vibrant and beautiful, and just like is so known for is just like being this absolute legend who I believe she still performs, and you know, and is well into like her 80s, and is just somebody who like inspires me as far as like the longevity of your performance, and just still has so much energy and life in her. um, you know, also Gal Costa, um, you know, Sade. There are, it's such a broad question just because of the influences that I draw from. just like there are so many. It's just like, wow, like my last album, like I incorporated a lot of things from grave diggers to like various metal albums to bossa nova. I studied ethnomusicology at Evergreen, and I just like I listen to such a broad spectrum of music that I really don't think I have any singular influence or anything. But a lot of the music that I like to listen to is I like very psychedelic South American music. I like Afrofuturistic music. I really like. I'm a big metalhead, and I like a lot of like horrorcore kind of music. So I think that that all accumulates into what I play.
Mm. When you're trying to express yourself, do you find that you're trying to express in a way that's like very cathartic, or is it like very much just like haha?
I think it's a lot of both actually, because like
Can you also talk about how you mix them a little bit?
yeah, so much of it is the same. Like sometimes I'll get really mad at something and I'll write a song about it. Like I have a song called I Will Stab Jeff Bezos in the Neck. um and it's like it's super cathartic, but it's also like it's super funny. Like he has he has a museum in Seattle that I got to perform at, and um I performed like 2 or 3 songs, and of course I performed that one, and I was just like that was definitely one of the better times that I apologize. That was one of my favorite performances for sure. Like and I do things like that, there's people in the media that I think are bad people, that frustrate me, um incidents that have happened in my life that I can't express well, like in words. I think that it's a really good way to express trauma, when you aren't able to put it into words. Um, but a lot of it's also like you can be playful with music in a way that you can't, in conversation. Or I really like to be able to use wordplay. I like using like triple and even like quadruple entendre, and it's so fun. I don't know, like it's fun even when it's not fun, even the parts that make me sad, when I think about it later. I think about the way that I'm able to be clever about it, or the way that I'm able to express myself in a particular way with it. I sometimes can feel proud of myself about it.
Mm. How do you know when not to take yourself too seriously about it too? Like, I think that you have to respect yourself, but when should you like let go?
I always try to respect myself, and I always try to never take myself too seriously. Um,
Mhm.
one of my favorite gods in the pantheon of Santeria is Elegua, and he's the god of the crossroads, and he is, um, with the crossroads, it's everything and it's nothing, and it, a lot of people, that's where the depiction of the devil comes from in a lot of it's highly speculated, as far as like the devil at the crossroads, and the idea of Robert Johnson and the devil. It very much comes from Elegua, and um, I love the idea of the creator and the destroyer. The idea of that comes from so many things, and I think that it's hard for me to think of myself as one way or the other. I feel like I exist in a very liminal space, as is everybody. It's like I find that it's hard for me to hold respect for myself while also taking myself very seriously. I I don't think I could ever like fully take myself like seriously. I feel like I will always have that bit of myself that's like, come on, like you're just a goofy bitch, like, you know.
Yeah. And I also wonder, kind of in that sense of, not really in that sense, but when you're performing, what makes like a really good performing experience for you? Like, I know that's kind of a different route, but yeah, like what allows you to have like a really fulfilling performance?
That is definitely when I'm able to be in the moment fully throughout a performance and to fully see the audience, which sounds like cryptic, I guess, but I mean, sometimes I'll notice in a performance that I'm like dissociating and that I'm not fully, that it feels like it's just me. Um, so when I'm fully cognizant of who I'm performing for and just like aware that I'm on stage and that I'm a performer and that I'm there performing for people, you know, which sounds so silly saying it out loud, but I think maybe it's because it's such muscle memory now that it can sometimes feel like I'm going through emotion, and I have to just like remind myself to be fully present. And when I'm being fully present and I am able to get to that point where I'm like, you know, being able to be playful, but also take myself seriously enough that I'm doing a good job, but I'm also having a good time, you know, then I think that's when my performances are best.
Thank you. I think we are almost about to come to time. Um, and let me see. Like, do you have anything that you you want to talk about in particular that we haven't gone over?
Um, hmm. I guess the one thing I can think of really is just like it's okay to feel that FOMO. I feel like everyone is really feeling it. Like no matter how connected you are, you're gonna feel disconnected. You know, there's no way to keep up with everything that's happening. Like there's stuff happening every single day. You're gonna miss out on a few things, and even if you're missing out on a lot of things, I think that that's okay. You know, like you can catch up on some of these things. The thing that's the most important is self-care right now. Really, you just like, you know, I feel like a lot of what I'm saying is very cliche, but it's important. Like we are really going through a time that is uncharted, and what's most important for us right now is taking care of ourselves and trying to take care of each other as best as we can from where we are. Um, like I wasn't doing very great for a while, and then I started Zooming with my best friend every day, and honestly we Zoom for like a couple hours every day, and like so we won't even like be having a conversation the whole time. Sometimes we'll just like it'll just kind of feel like we're in the same room together, and that's helped me so immensely. And I think that it's just important to find something that helps you every day, and I think that that's really what's been helping me get through this. And it's okay if you haven't found like a little group that you're playing like Jackbox with every day, or it's okay if you're not going to all of these virtual raves. Like if you're just hanging out with your partner, or if you're just sitting and reading a book every single day, you know, and not being involved in these things, like it's fine, you know, like you're surviving, you're here, and hopefully you're staying healthy, and that's what's important.
Oh, yeah. Well, I would like to thank you so much again for coming out and spending an hour with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Well, gosh, I'm like, how do you end a Zoom webinar? Like, do you like smile? Well, yeah. Also, oh, would you mind dropping like shouting out your Venmo / like Cash App or whatever info so that we could just like upload it, let
Oh
people
my
know.
gosh, yeah. My Venmo's Guava Season. It's the same as my Instagram. Um, yeah, I sell rings on my Instagram. Sell some pretty cool ones. If you're ever interested, whoever's watching this, I'll adorn your hands.
And you also have a Bandcamp, and do you have a SoundCloud too?
I do. I think the URL for that is AEONFUXXX, and my SoundCloud, my Bandcamp URL is It's Guayaba.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I hope you have a good day. And I also want to thank the the attendees for joining us. So yeah.